Okay, so welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about some random tips and tricks and ideas and things you might want to consider that hopefully might make your life using Visual Studio and doing coding a little bit easier. Some of these I use often, and in some cases, I don't see others talking about these. So we're going to go through some of these and hopefully they'll help you. Now, again, I encourage you, if you like or kind of like any of these videos or at least appreciate them, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and the bell notifications. And most of all, if you know of anybody, you encounter anybody who might be kind of interested in some of these, I encourage you to let them know about it, let others know about it. Otherwise, if there's not a lot of interest in these videos, there's not much reason to continue them. So I encourage you, if you appreciate them, to take a little bit of action and help to promote them. So what we're going to talk about is some internal Visual Studio tips and tricks, and also some external stuff. The first thing I want to talk about is something I never hear people talk about. I use it all the time, and I find it to be extremely useful. And that is to start up multiple instances of Visual Studio. So what do I mean by that? Well, in this case here, this code is fairly complex simulation that I'm doing, and I'll run it and show you what it's doing. This has got a lot of classes, it's got a lot of logic going on, it's an engineering simulator, and the user inputs stuff and inputs in these text boxes and basically starts a time step simulation that simulates electrical switches and that kind of thing. And it can get kind of complex. You can see the simulation will go for 10, 20, 30 seconds. And every half a second it updates status of equipment. And when you're doing something like this that can get kind of complicated, it helps to start up another instance, a completely clean instance of Visual Studio, in cases where you say, I might want to put some of this code into a separate class. And not really sure how the class is going to look, but I'll go start another instance of Visual Studio and work on the class separately so it doesn't mess up my main code, okay? So I do that a lot, especially if you're not really sure about how you're going to implement the class, and you certainly don't want to mess up your main code by putting in something and tying it in and finding out, no, that's a big mess. So I do that very, very often. Also, as you can imagine here, if I'm doing a simulation and I'm into, after about 30 seconds of a simulation, suddenly it gets into a state that causes an error, it can be kind of difficult to backtrack and say, well, wait a minute, what were all the things that caused that at that point in time? So it really helps to be able to segment that out into a separate piece of code and play with it and figure it out. Otherwise, trying to debug and step through 50 or 100 different time steps can get really kind of complicated. So again, I encourage you, what I do is I just go down to I've got Visual Studio on my taskbar, and I just go down to the Visual Studio icon, right click, and start up another Visual Studio. And, you can do a console application, you can do Windows Forms. If you want to try something out, I find it to be very, very useful. Again, it helps if you've got multiple monitors. I've got 3 monitors. But often I'll have 3 instances of Visual Studio going. One is some classes I've worked on before and I want to bring them over to my main application. And maybe another one is something I'm trying out. So again, think about it. It can be, in my experience, it can be very, very helpful. So the next thing I want to talk about is something we've talked about before, and that is using Excel. I am a big fan in programming of using Excel. Again, I do a lot of engineering stuff, but Excel can be very helpful. We've talked in previous videos about making CSV files. If you want to see what your data looks like. If you've got a database, or you've got something else, you're trying to design a database, you're trying to design your input data, you can set that out into an Excel spreadsheet, make a CSV file. You can generate all kinds of things in an Excel spreadsheet to help you to visualize what your data is actually doing. I find that to be very, very, very useful. So consider using Excel or OpenOffice or LibreOffice or whatever you prefer. Again, very helpful as a third-party piece of software to help you do your coding. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Git. Now, I'm not going to talk in any depth about it. Just I'm going to mention that if you're not using Git for what they call source control, you need to think about using Git. Now, again, I'm not going to go into the details. Maybe I'll save that for another video. But Git basically gives you a way to keep track of changes made to your source code, and it's kind of it keeps track of each change that you make, and you can save that. So it almost gives you like a calendar of different changes, kind of like when you do backups of files on your computer. Usually when you're backing up files on your computer, one of the options is an incremental backup, and really that just stores the change in a file. So if you go into like a Word file and you make a change, it stores the change only, and it also keeps a main version. So it basically gives you a change log. Again, I don't find that useful for stuff like Word documents and my daily work, but when coding, it is extremely useful, and it's probably the best way to be able to make changes in your code and not mess things up. So I strongly recommend you basically just go down to the bottom right and add to source control, and we may talk about that later. But Git is very, very useful. Again, you don't need to use GitHub, which brings your code up onto the network or onto the internet. I don't do that. I just do local source control on my computer. Very helpful. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is a task list or a to-do list. I am a big fan of keeping track within my code via comments on what things I need to do to improve my code, things I'm working on. And what I will do, here I'm in my main form 1, I will keep a to-do list, and I'll add to it as things come up. Now, if you do it in this format with a comment and a to-do like this, it will, Visual Studio will keep track of all your to-dos throughout your different classes and your different code. So what I can do is I can go to the View menu up here and go down to Task List, and you can see down here on the bottom, here's all my to-dos. So it gathers all of the to-dos throughout your code and puts them into a list, and it tells you where it's located, where in the project it's located, and you can go through and look at all of your to-dos and address them. Now, I tend to not use the task list very much. I tend to just put everything in my main application, so I have one place to go to. But again, very, very helpful to keep track of what you need to do. Again, I'm very big on documenting code. I know a lot of people, a lot of coders, dislike documentation. They just want to write code. I'm kind of the opposite. I like to write code so I can understand what I've done, a month ago or something. Now, along those lines, I also like to do what you see here, which is called utilizing regions. And regions are areas defined by a pound region and an end region that you can put a title to, and you can close it and open it. So it gives you a very nice visual picture of how your code is laid out. So I've got my main application, then I've got these methods. I've got UI methods, helpers, debug methods, event handlers. So it really helps you to make your code in object-oriented, kind of, where you've got blocks of code that you can easily understand what's what. Now, to do that, for example, I wanted to make this area into a region. I would do a pound REG, tab, and you can see it automatically gives you the region, the end region, and you can type out whatever you want. And I can say this is a new region. Okay, and it gives you this drop down clicker here, and now you've got a new region. Now what I can do is I can use another very, very valuable keyboard shortcut, and that is being able to move this line that says end region down, say below this start X location, start Y location. And to do that, I do Alt and then the down arrow on my keyboard, and there you go. You've now defined your region by moving this line. And that is a very, very useful keyboard shortcut that I use. Again, it's an Alt arrow key. So you can Alt arrow up and arrow down, and very helpful, like if you want to move your brackets or your regions, or you want to move a line to a different location. So for example, if I want to move the start X or start Y location, I just Alt up arrow and it moves and automatically moves other lines out of the way. So very, very useful. Now you can also do the same thing with entire blocks of code. So I just select these and I do an Alt up arrow, and you can see it moves it up and moves everything out of the way. Very useful. Now, just so you know, you can do the same thing in Word, in Microsoft Word, but it's Shift Alt arrow to move a line, and that can be very useful. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is if you want to duplicate a line. All right, say I want to duplicate this dev params. To do that, I just do a Control D, and it duplicates the line, and I can do that over and over and over again. And there you go. If you want duplicate lines, you're all set. Control D, or probably Command D on a Mac. Now, another one I want to mention is, for example, if I hover over this method, SQLite connection, you can see it says there are 3 overloads, but it doesn't tell you what the overloads are. And you can be scratching your head and say, yeah, okay, but where's the overloads? Well, the way to bring those out, I generally go inside the parentheses of the method and click, and then I do a Control Shift space. And you can see suddenly it pops up the clickable list of all the overloads. And here's 3 out of 4, and I can use my up and down arrow keys or my mouse clicks to go. Here we're at 2 of 4, 1 of 4, and then down arrow, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4 to show you the overloads that you can use here. So again, Control, Shift, and Space to see the overloads. So the last thing I want to talk about is a keyboard shortcut called box selecting. So say I'm down here and I want to, on all 4 of these lines, add the same, say I want to call everything static. So I hit Alt, click, left click, and then drag down here, and it selects the opening space. And I can type in STATIC, and you can see it inserts in front of all of these the same thing. And then I can backspace to delete it. And there you go. So very nice way to multi-select. And you can also do that inside. You can box select. So I can do Alt, left click, and drag, and I can select a box area, and I can change everything in that box simultaneously. So again, Alt, left click, and drag to box select. So I think that's about it for this one. Hope it's been useful and you found some tips you can use. Again, I encourage you, if you like or kind of like any of these videos, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe and hit the bell notification. And especially if you know of anybody who might be interested, let them know about it so that we can have reason to continue making more of these videos. So anyway, take care. Have a really good day. Thanks.